Rockingham Park owes its existence in part to the Boston Maine Railroad. The 1905 purchase of a group of farms here in Salem, just north of the border, was not accidental. In fact, it was right next to the Boston and Maine's Manchester and Lawrence branch, and that meant the perfect avenue to bring citygoers up from Boston. It's interesting to note that Rockingham Park is the same distance to Boston as the Saratoga racecourse was to Albany. These things were not a mistake. This is how they got people to come to the races. Horse racing was in vogue then, and by 1914, the name had been changed from Rockingham Fair to Rockingham Park, but everybody knew it as The Rock. This was a different time, and although horse racing and gambling that came with it was popular with the masses, it was not so with everyone, and church leaders in the Granite State were quick to lead a tirade against the new establishment. The state legislature was not the only group to realize the economic potential of Rockingham Park during the Depression. The Boston and Maine had already constructed a spur and a Y coming off the Manchester and Lawrence branch into the park earlier, on the south side of the racetrack, curving into the park along what is today the Route 38 ramp leading out to Interstate 93. A small railroad station had opened at the park in 1907, and trains had been running spectators to the fairs and shows for years. When parimutuel racing reopened in 1933, the Boston and Maine relocated their spur to the north end of the park, which curved in a half circle around the north end of the racetrack, coming to a stop, with two tracks mere yards from the grandstand itself. The B&M made its inaugural run on the day racing began, June 21st, 1933, with a 45-minute run from Boston, which cost the public only $1 round trip. The B&M christened the train the Rockingham Racer, a name symbolizing the speed of the thoroughbreds themselves. Before long, the race trains just exploded, and it was off to the races for the Boston and Maine. Had been necessary during the Depression, the years immediately following World War II made it paramount. Trains originated not only in Boston, but on occasion in Portland and Worcester, and the Racer became a major operation. In charge of it all was Portland Division Superintendent Charles Kane, who himself oversaw B&M operations at the park. Operations were down to a science. They had to be, with dozens of train crews working the numerous trains in and out throughout the course of race days. Trains had to arrive, depart, and board in the correct order. Locomotives, usually the Boston and Maine's ubiquitous P2 class Pacifics, needed to be cut off their trains, run in reverse in groups of as many as 6 at a time, back to Lawrence for servicing and turning, then run north back to the park. This had to be done right, as South Lawrence could only handle 6 locomotives at a time. In the meantime, coaches would be crammed into any available siding at Salem Depot, Canopy Lake, even as far away as 9 miles north in Derry. In the 1950s and 1960s, things began to change. With other entertainment options available and horse racing losing focus in the public eye, the Rock began to feel the strain. Things were changing on the B&M too. The post-war love affair with the automobile and the McGuinness administration's cutting of special trains and long-distance passenger trains put the writing on the wall. Fewer sections were run, by now with diesel-powered EMD GP7s and Alco RS3s. Self-propelled Budd RDCs followed, but in 1958, the racer did not run save for one round trip Monday through Friday, with two on Saturdays. In the autumn of '58, an evening racer plied the line Monday through Saturday, with similar schedules through to 1960. The end came in 1961. One round trip a day, 6 days a week, powered by Budd RDCs, which would then be deadheaded back to Lawrence while the race was going on for use in regular passenger service elsewhere. The Rockingham racer made its last dash for the finish on September 2nd, 1961. Down to the wire, a photo finish, and that was that. Though the trains had stopped running, the B&M's Manchester and Lawrence branched local freights occasionally did work at the park, spotting cars of feed and supplies. Empty gondola cars, spotted at Canopy Lake, would be filled with manure and hay trucked from the park, which would then be used at mushroom farms in Pennsylvania and Canada. A terrible fire ripped through the grandstands on July 29, 1980, a fate shared by so many of New Hampshire's great structures and institutions. And though the park reopened 4 years later, it was never the same, and everybody knew it. But the Rock was still a local symbol of pride and a recognized landmark well into the 20th century. The railroad, having long ended its connection with Rockingham Park, saw its last freight trains run through Salem in 2001. Horse racing ended here for good on September 1st, 2009. And years later, the Rock went dark for the last time on August 31st, 2016. In the summer of 2017, the Rock came down. Where once hundreds of thousands had stood, had won and lost, had made memories to last a lifetime. The reminder of a stylish past cast to memory. As you can see here in 2020, the plan is already underway to redevelop the real estate once known as Rockingham Park into what will be called the Tuscan Village, a living recreation and lifestyle village. And while it might be a better use of the land than an ailing racecourse, and certainly more profitable, it just doesn't have the same ring to it as the Rock once did.